Decades ago, towards the end of my misspent college years, two friends and I were called to the office of the vice president of our university. We didn't know ahead of time the reason for our summons, but we went anyway, obediently. When we arrived, we were ushered into the presence of the vice president. He informed us that the activities of the student group that we were leading had drawn the ire of IBM and had cost the university $1 million grant. This was back when $1 million was real money. The vice president was therefore not pleased with us. In fact, he was downright resentful. He quoted to us the equally resentful IBM executive who had gotten in touch with him as saying, "Our company is not accustomed to feeding the hand that bites us." Thank you. That was the appropriate response. That little incident from long ago comes to mind for a few reasons. First, because I've never been able to shake the weirdness of that mixed metaphor. Feeding the hand that bites us, since hands don't bite and eat. More urgently, however, we hear daily of attempts by government and private interests to pressure colleges and universities to stifle protest, to punish dissent, and to limit academic freedom, using threats and intimidation and the power of the purse. And also, I think of that little IBM incident as I contemplate the role of resentment in my life, in our lives, and in the common life of our politics and social fabric. Which brings us to today's reading, the parable of the prodigal parent. In particular, I want to focus on the resentment expressed by the older son as he reacts to the unfairly gracious treatment received by his younger brother, by their father, who's the farmer. I guess I should start by explaining that I like to call this story the parable of the prodigal parent, not only because it's more alliterative than the prodigal son, but also because that title highlights the reckless generosity of the farmer in the story. Generously prodigal in granting the younger son's request for a share of the property, even though he might have known the younger son lacked the maturity to use it wisely. Generously prodigal also in giving the rest of the property to the older son. You might have noticed how the farmer divides his assets, his property, between the two sons, right there at the beginning of the story. He gives everything away to his children. Generously prodigal, of course, in the way he then receives the younger son when he comes back after wasting all that money. This prodigal parent runs to greet this kid, embraces him, kisses him, and stops him in the middle of that carefully rehearsed apology speech. And then this prodigal parent calls to the servants to robe the kid in a robe, bring on some bling, sling on some sandals, and kill a beast for the feast, making a meal of the veal. And you know what? Yeah, I couldn't resist. You know what? When the older son hears all that, he resents it. He really resents it. He is understandably, I think, full of resentment. So what is resentment? We hear a lot about the politics of resentment, playing such a big role in our present political and social moment. We hear daily from our resenter-in-chief, no president in history has ever been treated so unfairly. But what is resentment? If you take the word apart, At its root, it simply means to feel intensely. That's the etymology of the word, but it means so much more than just that. Resentment is a complicated emotion, combining anger and disappointment and disgust and disapproval. Resentment is not usually a positive emotion. It can be downright debilitating, but it is unavoidable. For instance, I'd like to take a little poll. Who here has ever received an unfair grade on an assignment in school? Well, yes. Who has ever been passed over for a job you were qualified to do? Who has ever been accused of something you didn't do? Oh yeah. Who has ever been treated in a particular way because of your gender or your race or your economic status or something else? Who has seen someone else get credit for something you have done or accomplished? Oh, Lord have mercy. Life presents us with plenty of reasons for resentment. Many of them legitimate. The trouble with resentment is that when it doesn't have a proper outlet, some way of addressing the unfair situation, some way of expressing disappointment or outrage, resentment can fester. It can build up. And that resentment can end up debilitating and controlling the resenter. We see that, don't we, in our parable of the prodigal parent. When the older son hears about the over-the-top celebration being lavishly lavished on his younger brother, he really resents it, to the point where he becomes angry and refuses to go inside to join the party. How many times do our own resentments hold us back from enjoying the things that life wants to offer us? But here's the thing. When his father comes outside to plead with him, the older brother has a chance to express his feelings and his disappointment, his disgust, his anger, his rage. He's done everything right his whole life, according to him. He's worked like a slave. He's never disobeyed. And what has he gotten for all that? Well, apart from owning the whole rest of the farm, what has he gotten from all that? Still, he's missing something very important. In his mind, he is missing something very important. Appreciation. And you can hear the hurt in his words. Listen, he says, for all those years, I have been working like a slave for you, and I've never disobeyed your command, yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your assets with prostitutes, I don't know where he got the prostitutes from, maybe his own imagination, you made a big deal with a meal of veal for him. Dad, he says, what are you doing? You are feeding the hand that bit you. And to his credit, this prodigal parent doesn't challenge that resentment or the fact that this elder son denies his own relationship to his brother, calling him the son of yours. Instead, the prodigal parent responds thoughtfully, generously, familially, focusing on the relationship. My child, he says, my child. You are always with me. All that is mine is yours, he says, and we know that's literally true. What our prodigal parent does is to try to explain and really to share the almost inexpressible joy that he has, that he's feeling at this reconnection, this reconciliation he had given up hoping for, this restored relationship that seemed impossible. He does one other thing, this prodigal parent. He doesn't say, look, this other son of mine was dead and has come to life. No. He says, this sibling of yours, this Adelphos Sue, in Greek. This brother of yours was dead to us and now is alive with us, was lost to us and has been restored to us, making our whole family whole again. Friends, there is a place for resentment in our life, in our common life, in our individual lives. There are things going on now that I know I resent, and I resent deeply. These times may well call forth resentment in us, but let it be a holy resentment. Let it be a sacred resentment. Surely we resent the cruel and cynical ways that people are used and mistreated. Surely we resent the many ways people are marginalized or ostracized. Surely we resent the ways compassion is seen as weakness. And we had better resent the ways that cynical politicians, for their own ends, are willing to lie, fabricate, and victimize the vulnerable. I want us to hold on to that holy resentment, that sacred resentment, and at the same time, think that God may find a way to open us up to the possibility of restored relationships and reconciled differences, even in this troubled and divisive time. That God may open us up to a possibility of honest conversation with those who have wronged both us and those we've cared about. Because that is the way of God's own prodigally generous Son, Jesus, who gave up everything for us out of his amazing grace, and whose final words were, God, forgive them. And because that is the way of our own prodigal parent who never stops feeding the hand that bites, even when those hands belong to us, even when those hands belong to me, so be it.